Yes. Okay, Jerry, off you go.
In the first video, you modelled how to give support to a teacher with a really restless class. What would you do if they're totally out of control?
Some years ago, back in Australia, I walked past a class where a boy was putting his hand in plaster into one of those overhead fans, yeah? Sticking it in and jamming it. The class was in uproar. I saw through the window my colleague's really pained expression. And it's similar to the scene you saw on the shot before, in the classroom before. And we've also shown in those shots how some senior teachers storm in and just take over. If it's that bad, if it's that out of control with a little kid with his hand in the fan and the class in catalytic uproar, it's important to get the teacher out, because it's a waste of time taking 2 or 3 kids out. So it's important to knock on the door, come in, and then say to the teacher, "Excuse me, class, sorry to bother you. Excuse me, class, sorry to bother you, Mr. Smith. There's a message at the office." And the teacher just races out like that and heads for the office. The worst thing to do is to come in and do what we've seen on the video, the teacher shouting at the class and then walking out and leaving the teacher in professional and personal disarray. That kind of approach, though, has got a short shelf life. And by the way, there's no message at the office. The message is who's got your class. But it's got a short shelf life. If we've had to do this twice in close succession, we must set up a longer-term support option for that teacher. And we'll be looking at some of those issues later. It's also important to debrief with that teacher. How long, how often, who are the ringleaders, and so on. But the worst thing we can do is to simply go in and take over the class. Now, once a teacher's gone, there's a message at the office, and they do move fairly quickly. It's important that the support teacher at that point doesn't walk into the class and say, "Right, the real teacher's arrived," the one who's got it sorted, and starts lecturing the class, because that'll get back through the tribal tom-toms to all the other kids. And by default, we've made our colleague not look just ineffective, but incompetent. So the debriefing is important too. Normally what we do long-term is to help that teacher to develop a fresh start with the class, and we do that through collegial mentoring. That's something we'll look at a little bit later. Any other questions? Yes?
Would you agree that confident and experienced teachers sometimes come unstuck, as it were, with a hard class?
If I was cocky, I'd say no, wouldn't I? But I'm not. But sometimes you do get a little bit sharp, a little bit cocky, think you've got it sorted. And at 57, I've certainly slipped up many times, thought I've got it reasonably under control, and then suddenly a class will surprise you, a group will surprise you. It takes longer to get that class focused and more cohesive as a learning community. When I was here last year, I worked with the school in special measures for 3 days. I was living over here for 6 months, so I could squeeze in a little bit of mentoring. And this was a school in London, and when I took this lesson, it took me 5 minutes to get this class in any shape or form settled. There was calling out, there was butting in, lots of, "Hey sir, who are you? Is she going or something? What are you doing here?" A lot of low-grade sort of residual suspiciousness, you know, with this new teacher. And I think every second kid who said "sir" spelled it with a C. Rather, no, seriously, I mean, it was a lot of this kind of, "Oh, what you doing here?" It took me 5 minutes to work my way through the breaks in the traffic. You know what I mean by breaks in the traffic? You're waiting for those little breaks in the energy where you can say, "All right, settling down, everyone. Settling down, thanks. Fairly restless today. Eyes and ears this way. Eyes and ears this way, that's much better." People are a lot more relaxed. And then there was only 3 or 4 kids calling out. So obviously I dealt with those. But nearly 5 minutes by the time we'd worked that through. So yes, even at our age, you know, sometimes it does take a while. But if we persist with those skills and practices we discussed before, I believe we can, you know, effectively get classes working and cooperating with us. Yeah. But, you know, there will be some times when we've got to work a little bit harder. It's not always, doesn't always come easy. And I think it's important to remember that. And never get to the point where we think we've got it all sorted. That's really, really important, that we never get to the point where we think we've covered everything we need to do.